Welcome to the intro, no need for introductions. All about the world and the world what we discussing. Where every single thought that we had came from something. So it's funny that we made it when we started here with nothing. Gotta open up your mind just to find out why. When you lost inside the dark, just gotta turn on the light. And no matter what you do, you never run from a fight. Because we fighting to be better and that's why we strive.
My side looks cooler.
Yeah, I know, yeah. We got the cool background here. We got the whywestrive shoes. You know, we're chilling. Sweet. Well, this is the third interview I've done in here, the fourth interview that's been done, but this is the first time we have the actual, your backdrop done with this
so cool.
Garrett put in the new lights. You got the plants in the background. It is pretty sick.
No,
so,
it looks awesome.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Like, I wish my office looked like this.
I wish my office looked like this too. Technically, I could use this as my office, but I have to drive pretty far to get here every day. So. But sweet, I'm here with Smriti Zaneveld. Okay, I had you on my original podcast years ago, but what's exciting about this is you guys have done, I'm assuming, so many things. You just texted me yesterday and said you were in town, and I was like, well, let's do a podcast. I usually have a big list of questions here, but like I know a lot about you and your husband Jacques and all the cool stuff you guys are doing, so I figured let's wing it. So if you want to introduce yourself, we can get going.
Yeah, Dr. Smriti Zaneveld. I'm the founder of Lazarus 3D, as you know. And Lazarus 3D's goal is to really focus on a big problem in healthcare, which is medical errors, surgical errors, and just risk. And so how do we reduce risk in surgery where patients don't end up with a complication tied to their procedure? So that's the problem that we're addressing, and the solution is really using this technology that we developed as a platform that allows surgeons to rehearse on every complex case, individual before they operate, right? So that's the technology, and that's pre-sure.
Do we have any in person right now? Do we have any?
I actually do, but it's in my bag.
Okay, fair enough.
Should I grab it?
We should totally do it. We should totally do it. I've never seen it before. Yeah,
I have a little kidney here. And obviously this is one of the pre-sure models. So this is a copy of an individual, of a patient, a very young patient. And you can see that's their tumor, that's their healthy kidney, that's their ureter.
Can we show the camera too? Like this camera right here?
Oh, sure, yeah.
So cool.
Yeah, so this is obviously one of the small patients. And then here is a adult kidney.
Oh my God.
Also, so yeah, this is.
Can I feel that really quick?
Cool. Yeah.
Oh, what?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And then the vessels are fluid filled, so if they were to cut into it, it's going to start bleeding, right?
Okay.
Yeah. And then that's the tumor right there.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And same thing here. So there is the ureter right there, and then the artery, and then the vein.
This might be a really stupid question, but how are these all? I mean, I don't think they're all, but are those all color coordinated relatively, or like you make it more obvious which one's which? So
we made it different, like in terms of the tumor versus the healthy tissue. In real life, it's not like that.
Gotcha.
But the reason we made it specifically different is because when they excise it, it's important to see, whether they left something behind.
Gotcha. Okay.
And so of course that's not the goal.
Yeah.
But this allows them to, like, sort of go back in and look at do an assessment of their procedure, of their plan. When they're exercising the plan in the rehearsal, they can go back in and sort of like review it and then learn from that as well.
But with a real tumor, it would be the same color as the skin?
In the real procedure, like, and I can show you like that side by side video.
I mean, not the skin, but you know what I meant.
But I mean, it's there's some distinction. The most critical distinction though is the material, like how the tumor tissue feels compared to the healthy surrounding tissue.
Okay, gotcha.
That's the main difference, and that's replicated here.
Okay, so if there was a little, so like technically if you were like a doctor, even though they're the same color, you could kind of go in blind and still kind of know the difference in feel, which would help you pull it out. Gotcha.
And you can feel that, right? So that the kidney, the surrounding, and that's a lot harder. Exactly.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
So
and then the same thing here. It's all of those structures feel different. So that's
my God, this is crazy.
Yeah.
This is way cooler than our original podcast where we're just like remote on Zoom and I can't even see you. Yeah, this is cool. So cool. Okay, so What I learned on the last podcast, which blew my mind, is that prior to you guys, surgeons literally practice on like just common fruit and like vegetables, and that's how they practice to literally do surgery on hearts.
Yeah. So unfortunately, yes. So so I was with a room full of surgeons at a dinner 2 days ago, and that's part of why I was here in Austin. We're sort of growing and really expanding to a lot of institutes, including hospitals in Texas, including some very prominent hospitals here. So when I, presented Pre-Sure to them, and really it was, to get the genuine feedback of where they see the value and what kinds of cases, will benefit from this. They all agreed in consistently that when they learned, or when they were starting out and they had finished their residency, they were sort of like very, very they were excited but very nervous,
terrified,
terrified, right?
Yeah.
About like doing their first case or their first whatever cases. And so it's true, prior to that, their training in the residency program had come from suturing on a banana, or chicken, or even like there's obviously cadavers, but they don't operate on those cadavers. That's for gross anatomy. And as obviously that cadavers don't have tumors in them. So
I did not know that.
Well, and certainly it's difficult to
put a
be
tumor
like,
in there, I guess.
maybe,
like,
a lot of times even robotic surgeons will learn how to operate on a grape, for example.
Gotcha.
Or bell pepper, like they'll remove seeds from the bell pepper, and that was honestly like at the beginning we all thought that was a joke, but then we saw it in action. Wow. And I can't I can't tell you.
I mean, it's obvious now that I'm seeing this, and now that you told me before too, like years ago, it sounds such an obvious solution. Like it's like duh, like make silicone parts and then test them. But so why do you think you're the first company to come out and like really do this?
Yeah, I think it was a technology gap, right? So
Gotcha.
Previously, with all of the 3D printing tools and technologies that were available, people would be able to 3D print in hard plastic, so you could make like bone or spine or skull or jaw, or any like,
better for like the dental field, probably,
or dental as well. Exactly.
Yeah.
But when it came to soft tissue, they couldn't really do it. So what they were doing and are still doing is 3D printing hard plastic replicas, and that is already a huge enhancement from looking at something in 2D, right? So you're looking at like single slices versus now you're looking in 3D form. You're holding it in your hand and you're like really 360 looking at it. But the limitation there is that now the surgeon wants to plan and exercise that plan and cut into it and operate on it realistically, and that's not an opportunity, right?
Yeah.
And so why that was not an opportunity? Because the technology did not exist. And obviously 3D printing and soft tissue materials and like being able to control the properties, the colors, the textures, and then like so many different aspects of the surrounding tissue as well, like that's important too. And then the anatomic accuracy of the model that is being derived from the scans of the individualized patient, that's a lot to sort of like consolidate into a process or technology. And so that's why it wasn't out there. It's not that people hadn't tried. Like large multi-billion-dollar companies that are in the space, like in 3D printing, have attempted this multiple times and have even reached out to us, to be honest.
Like, how'd you do this?
Right. Exactly.
Isn't it so badass how like time and time again, the more I talk to entrepreneurs, the more I realize that like billion-dollar companies typically don't know like how to do things that like a small team like yourself you and your husband and your team can accomplish. Like it's honestly insane. I mean, you look at all these companies and they like the Southwest situation right now, it's like their entire system shut down because they didn't have like a basic booking software internally. It's like it's absolutely insane. And then these companies spend billions of dollars and they can't do, and then you guys are like, here we go, like we built it.
Well, it wasn't
like,
easy.
Well, I know it wasn't easy, but like
I think that the key difference, and as we are growing, like we are starting to see this as well. At the beginning we would do whatever. We had an idea, we would just like go dive into it, like nosedive, right? And so now we have to sit back a little bit and like, okay, there is a lot of ideas, but which ones are we going to really pursue and why? And what's the rationale? And what's the time investment? And what's the, cost to this? And what is the value add to it? Who's going to benefit from it? Like, we have to think so much before we just jump into something now.
Yeah, of course.
And so also the team is bigger, and so their time is valuable too. And you have to just know that you have limited resources, even though you are bigger now, and it's a different situation post fundraise, but it's challenging now to just dive in versus at the beginning it was like,
let's just do it.
Like, let's just do whatever, right? I mean, there's still a lot of that happens, but it's more of a balancing act now.
Hold this really quick.
Yeah.
So what was I going to ask? How much have you guys fundraised so far, like total?
So at the beginning, prior to our patents, prior to the FDA clearance and all of that, we had not really fundraised.
Gotcha.
We had bootstrapped from sales.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So we had sales, right? And so that was not for this technology. I mean, it was similar, but it was not patient-specific applications. That's regulated by the FDA. Anything that you do where it's going to be precision medicine, anything that has to do with patient scans or patient data, or anything that is like aiding in their decision-making process, that's regulated now. That was not determined till like 2017, 2018.
Gotcha.
But before then, we were selling obviously to medical schools, residency programs, medical device companies. And so it was like, okay, let's just get through those first early days of survival, right? And so we had raised a little bit, but not much. And so it wasn't until last year where we had unlocked some significant milestones.
Nice.
And we raised $9 million. So
Damn.
And so after the conversion, it was like 10.4 total. But
so cool.
Yeah.
Wait, do you have that dollar amount in your bank, or are they paying you in like tranches?
No. It's like one swoop, right? So like there's this one day where it all happens, and everyone's wiring in at the same time.
So you have like $9 million in your bank right now, like 8 or 9 million.
I mean, it was so we have used some of the money to hire.
Of course, but still, like it's in that range. Isn't that crazy to look at? Like I'm definitely way lower than that, but we got like we had like a $200K investment last year, and like the $200K wired in, and then all of a sudden I'm like, that's $200,000 in my bank account.
Yeah.
And so I can't imagine if it just had like the zeros just like
adding
up beyond that.
The first time we saw those many zeros, it was honestly during the pandemic when we had borrowed that much money to upfront the cost.
You were telling me about that last night.
Tooling, and so that money was there for like, I don't know, like an hour before it was gone, right?
Yeah.
And so in that hour, everyone's like, okay, it's here. But it was happening so fast. Everything at that time, in that moment, it was sort of insane that the people trusted us with
it's crazy
money like that.
Yeah.
Where it was money in and then money out straight to the factories, like, and it was a lot of struggle, of course, but it was a lot of learning on steroids, and that was an incredible opportunity. But also like to be comfortable or to recognize that you can be, a good steward of funds,
a lot of funds
with those many zeros. Yeah.
But really quick, I want to go on your we need to describe your background, because you have last time I did the podcast, I was just going through your LinkedIn awards and education and certificates and everything, and it's honestly exhausting. So can you just highlight like maybe your top 20, top 10?
You're so funny.
Things.
But I don't know. I don't think I've accomplished a lot, but I don't see it that way. I just see it as like my journey, right?
Yeah. So but on paper, what do we got going?
Sure.
Also, I forgot to call you doctor earlier. I apologize.
It's okay. It's all right.
There we go.
So my background is obviously I'm very passionate about science and data and healthcare. So when I started out, it was very focused on precision medicine for genetic conditions that affect so many people. So first the question was identifying the cause of those rare forms of neurodegeneration that lead to blindness. And then after that, it was, well, now we found these potential, causes. Let's do a clinical study to find a treatment opportunity. And so that, I guess, approach that I took to that problem was using gene therapy to look at the clinical value of whether or not it can prevent loss of vision in my animals that were part of my clinical trials that were afflicted by it. And
Gotcha.
so that was really, really cool and exciting. So what I was doing actually at that time is taking patient mutations and replicating them in my in the animals, in the mice,
Okay.
and then basically targeting an approach to treat those the mutations leading to blindness, right?
Gotcha.
And so now it's funny because I do the same thing, but now instead of like the mutations, I take each patient's condition, right? So a tumor, a embolism, or a stricture, or a clot, and then we recreate that as pre-sure.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm a scientist by background, and I did my PhD at Baylor College of Medicine.
Okay.
Had a really phenomenal time, honestly. If you're not having fun in grad school, I would recommend just
Okay.
reconsider
Good to
your
know.
life choices. But grad school is about pursuing your passion and what excites you, and it's a lot of learning and growth. And so I think grad school was also the opportunity for me to learn from, my colleagues in surgical care. Because in my first year, I was considering, well, I'm going to do my PhD. Do I want to reconsider that and consider an MD PhD? Because Baylor had that program.
Gotcha.
And so that's when I was like asking a lot of questions.
Yeah.
And questions that led to those answers where it was like, yeah, we do surgery on a bell pepper and also a pumpkin and a potato, like using like a laser to ablate tissue in the prostate. Well, they practice that on a potato.
That's crazy.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I'm like, okay, wow, this is like not what I had expected, really. And so that's what led me to where I am today. But yeah, my background has always been a very curiosity-driven approach to problem solving. Yeah.
And a billion certifications and MDs and PhDs and everything. So do you guys just print off a bunch of hearts and then have them practice at colleges and different clinics, or are you literally like on a case-by-case basis, someone has a tumor in their heart and it's located in this spot, and then you literally 3D print that exact condition?
Yeah, so we do.
Okay.
We started out with the prior. So we started out with a form of a condition where we would make replicas, multiple of them, so that residents could train on them.
Cool. Yeah.
And so that platform is still value add to the users, because it reduces a big problem that they're facing, which is there's a learning curve tied to those high risk surgeries, and then also it's so delicate, and it's critical that they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
So it's obviously a huge value add. But we sort of transitioned from there to focusing on precision care, where we now, as a FDA cleared medical device company, manufacture replicas of each upcoming individual's surgery. And those are usually just one, because before they had none.
Yeah.
So going from none to one is, an opportunity that never existed for the surgeons.
Who is paying for the latter, like the actual specific condition? Is that like insurance? Is that like some rich guys like, look, I want to make sure you've done this 24 times before you do it for reals? Like,
well, yeah. So our goal when we figured this path, the regulatory path was, okay, with regulatory paths, when there is an FDA clearance, there is usually a reimbursement. So that's the R&R. And so the reimbursement entails that insurance will be the payer for this, right? And so if you look at it, it's kind of a little bit complicated. So the patients are benefiting from it because they're getting the best outcome.
Of course, yeah.
And that's driven by this approach that their surgeon is taking. So the surgeon is benefiting because they're optimizing, their strategy, their plan, executing on it prior to the real case. So they're minimizing any risk, complication, or anything that they may have foreseen or anticipated as a challenge. They're now able to overcome that in the rehearsal. So they're optimizing not only all the planning, but also their time in the OR. So now how does that help? Well, that's benefiting the hospitals, right? Because if you drive efficiencies in the OR, you're reducing cost in healthcare. And, so that's another factor. And then also risk reduction is a value add to the hospital because the biggest driver of cost in healthcare is actually liability and malpractice.
Gotcha.
And if you're able to reduce that burden, you're able to hopefully one day reduce overall costs in healthcare, where you're not only just reducing costs, but also providing better care.
Yeah.
And then at the end of all of this, so those are the three, right? And then there's the fourth player. So that's the insurance company. And the insurance company is the biggest,
pain in the ass.
Well, no, they're the ones that are getting the biggest value, I would say, right? So because what happens is when there's a surgery, and by the way, like for kidney cancer, patients that get treated surgically for their cancer, 40% of them will end up with chronic kidney disease. And that leads to dialysis or transplant. So why that happens, it's because there is this underlying risk of a complication that can happen in that procedure that will lead to that,
Gotcha.
I guess, really, it's a avoidable complication.
Gotcha.
And so anyway, so when they're able to avoid that downstream, like, sort of trajectory of the next steps, like how to manage those complications, that's $500,000 in cost to insurance. So if they're able to, like, literally take that away, even for, like, a subset of the patient population, that's going to be billions of dollars in savings.
Nice.
Hundreds of billions of dollars in savings, right? So mitigating surgical errors in healthcare already cost $200 billion to the U.S. annually.
Okay, so you guys are cutting that up. Nice.
Correct.
Nice.
Yeah. So that's the objective here, is how do we drive reduction in cost, reduction in risk, and thereby improve care. And that affects so many people. So
no, that's incredible. Do you have a because I'll actually we'll do two questions here. First one is just how many of these have you printed so far, like 1,000, 10,000, like that have actually been used in practice for surgeries?
Yeah, so from a training perspective, it's thousands.
Okay.
And that was prior to the FDA clearance of the patient-specific models. The patient-specific models, we just launched it last year.
Oh, cool.
And so there is always this process of onboarding with a hospital, and they go through a very thorough and robust review.
Well, I'm sure
right?
it's just exhausting. I
right.
can't imagine.
And so it's like so many things. You think like, oh, it's just the product. Well, no, it's not, because it's cybersecurity, data privacy,
tons of
legal
HIPAA stuff. Yeah.
Exactly. And so like, then this is even before you are in that phase of like, okay, what the contract entails. That's secondary. And so after that, you're like now fully onboarded, and that's when the surgeons are able to get the cases to you. So since that's been very recent, I would say that the numbers are not, in the thousands.
Yeah, of course.
And so, however, that is what we're targeting in this year. And so that's going to happen with the onboarding of these very prominent healthcare systems that we've just launched with.
So cool. And then, so I guess my second question following that up is, do you now, or do you think in the future you'll have a certain maybe percentage or stat of like what the average surgery is or versus what the average surgery is if they practiced before with the Lazarus 3D model?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. So that's data. That's, really crucial and critical. So we already have some level of that, right, from our prior sets of cases. And so some of the key metrics that we're looking at are things like how what is patient satisfaction? Like that's important. Was there a change in operative time? Was there a reduction in complication rates? And so then for certain procedures, there are other quantitative metrics that we can monitor and record. So the hospitals historically already have that information from their life prior to Lazarus 3D's,
nice.
models.
We'll call that BC.
Right,
Yeah.
and so BL before Lazarus,
Yeah.
And so then it's like, okay, now they have these sophisticated tools at their disposal, and I think the best surgeons are using it for their worst cases, and the new surgeons will probably benefit from it from
of course.
all cases.
What's a turnaround time? So I'm like, this guy's got this tumor, he's going into surgery, and I don't know. I honestly don't know what that means.
Yeah.
Did they take a step back? If I have a tumor and I have to go to the hospital, how soon is that surgery planned?
Yeah, so the surgery usually will be planned weeks in advance, right? Because hospitals are busy.
So they're not like,
going to be
you're
like,
here tomorrow.
Oh, it's not happening tomorrow, right?
Okay, gotcha.
It's like
I honestly had no idea.
Yeah,
Okay.
so it's usually planned weeks or even sometimes months in advance.
Okay.
For pre-sure, once we get the data, within the 24 hours, we'll get the digital twin to them.
Bam.
Right, and so then they have to review it, approve it, and then within 48 hours, they'll get the physical model sent to them.
So cool.
So,
okay.
yeah.
Wait, so do you, there's too many things to break down in that process, especially like medically for me to even ask, but do they just kind of call you and say, hey, this is what the tumor's like, or do they take a picture of it? How do you guys get that and then turn it into this?
Yeah, they don't have to call us or anything.
They're not
right?
texting it's in the
sometimes,
back.
sometimes they text us.
Yeah,
so
really?
this one surgeon, actually 2 weeks ago,
nice.
Was texting us, and he's like, this case is a doozy, and we're like,
it's a doozy?
we're like, oh, okay, cool. And so so we're like, okay, so are you going to send us the data? And he's like, yeah, he's in the process of sharing that. But he wanted to let us know that
this case is a doozy.
And so last week, the same thing happened. So we had this patient, actually, I guess I shouldn't comment, but a Texas patient.
Gotcha.
And so they had this thrombus. And we get the call, and in that case, it was a call. And because if you look at this thing, it's like massive.
Yeah.
And it's going into their right ventricle.
Oh,
this patient also has a tumor, and it's like, oh my gosh,
Dang.
right? And so anyway, I'm sorry, what was the question?
Oh, I don't remember.
How long?
Keep going.
The surgery is planned. So it's planned way in advance, and the model, it'll get there way before the real case.
Very
and
cool.
so often when this happens, like in that case of the where the surgeon said it was a doozy, we shipped the model to them. They were even able to use it to communicate with their teams, to the patient, show it to them, and then rehearse, of course, ahead of the curve. But yeah, if there's an emergency situation, we can get it out to the surgeons in as little as 24 hours.
And what a cool experience too for the patient. I've never really been in the hospital, to be honest. Thankfully,
I know, right? Yeah.
But I can you see in the movies, they'll pull up a fake heart. They're like, this is what your heart looks like. This is what we're gonna have to do. And then the patient's sick. I can imagine it being so cool if they're like, this is literally your heart, and then this is what's happening, and we're going to have to do this, and they can hold up an actual heart.
True.
So that's going to help them feel way more comfortable probably, or maybe not comfortable because they can see how bad the heart is.
Yeah.
but it's a cool experience. Yeah.
I think informed consent and informed decision making are both so important.
Absolutely.
And if I was that patient, and you have to understand that I know anatomy and science.
Okay, let's say it's not you. Let's say,
but even if it was me,
or
if it was you, I think that the initial instinct is oh no, right? I have this thing, and you're already terrified.
Yeah, of course.
And that will be true of no matter who you are, where you are in this world. You will always, that will be the first reaction.
Yeah.
No one's gonna be score, tumor,
Nice.
right? No.
Yeah.
So, and it's terrifying. So I think that ability to sort of comfort the patient and build trust and confidence with the patient from the beginning of here, this is what's going on, and look, I know that this is a lot, but you're highly recommend the surgery route, and that's scary too because your case is complex. But guess what? Here's the kidney. This is not some random heart that I've now pulled out, from like my anatomy like class. This is your kidney. This is your heart, whatever. And so I'm showing it to you, and then I tell you, look, I've already done it, and it went well. So though that is a positive indication of what we can expect from your outcome, it's still not definitive, right? Because so many other things can happen. But I am confident that this procedure is, going to be successful.
So cool.
Right.
And I bet you'd be the worst person to operate on because you'd be sitting there like, nope, that's
no.
not. You'd be like,
Well,
no.
Honestly, this all it was very personal for me, and I never talked about it. I don't think I've ever shared it, but this has happened now twice. Okay. Where first time it was my aunt who had breast cancer, and they're like, yeah, we got it all out, we're cool. And then she was in recovery, and then they were obviously monitoring it, but she was cancer free, or as far as we were aware, she was cancer free. But in real life, there was something that was left behind. And
really quick, what does that mean? Does that mean a piece, essentially a shrapnel kind of thing?
No, it's just not a shrapnel.
I mean, not shrapnel.
It's like cancer cells. So
but it's but what I mean is in that terrible analogy or metaphor is it essentially a tiny little piece that you might not have caught kind of thing? I don't mean the
so
blew up,
okay, so let me explain. So here you can see, right, there's this demarcation of where the tumor is and where the healthy tissue is. So what happens when they are cutting into it is obviously the goal is to get all of the cancer out. And so they have this thing, it's called a margin, and they preserve a margin so that
just in case there's a little bit
extra.
Right,
it's little bit, right? And so in that situation, if there is not that preservation of that margin, which usually they'll do a pathology follow-up to make sure that it's all clean, and then it could be a small amount, it could be a large amount, you don't know, that's left behind, and then it's gonna grow and sort of progress and spread.
You got hair on it too, so it's that's not good.
So yeah, it's just my luggage, but yeah, so that's what I'm talking about. And so that happened to her, and so she passed away.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And I mean, to the point where it had progressed, there is no going back. Then the same thing happened with my uncle, and more recently, and they're like, oh yeah, there's this tumor, and it was a kidney tumor, and we're gonna remove the tumor. And I was like, well, that's great. And so we were like, oh, is this high risk? What's the risk? You should ask the doctor these questions. And my uncle, he wasn't even here, he's in India at the time. And so they're like, no, it's gonna be great. And so they operate, and they're like, oh, it went so well. And I'm like, okay, cool. So what's the renal function, because you have two kidneys, and so is it the same? And they're like, no, we took the kidney out. And I was like, then how was this great? And so I guess the greatness was really the fact that he survived, and and nothing horrible happened other than the fact that they took his kidney out.
Well, with that, with your aunt's example, and I'm really sorry to hear that. Do you think that if she had one of these, when the surgeons had one of these to practice on, it would have
I mean, you've seen the video from the breast procedure that we built. That was one of our first models that we started out with. It's difficult to say, of course, right? Retrospectively, that it would have been different. That's impossible to say. But I think that even from last year, for every case where we provided these models, and the surgeons had a challenge where sometimes it was do I even pursue this surgery or do I not, right? It has been a huge asset to their care and for their patients. It's terrifying to hear from a surgeon who is so known in this space, in urology, and then to hear them say, yeah, actually I changed my strategy. And we're like, wait, what do you mean? And they're like, yeah, I was gonna go in do this thing, and then I was doing it on the rehearsal, and then I realized that that's not going to work. And so then they devised a new plan in that moment.
Because of your Lazarus, yeah. That's
well,
true.
and I don't know again, like if it's Lazarus or if they could have concluded that also with the patient, right, in the real surgery. But then you don't know if that would have led to something else.
Gotcha.
Like maybe just knowing it ahead of the curve saved them time or saved them that like I don't know, like conflict, I would say, like in the decision making process.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
One question I just thought of that I'm really pumped on. Is this a process that eventually you guys could have automated? Like as far as the building of the, I mean, well, technically it is automated, but like the process of establishing before the automation, could that be automated?
So the parts of the production process, or even just like going back to the data analysis process, there is like some components that are manual, and that's because currently AI and in imaging is not always the logical or the best choice when it comes to these soft tissues. So with bone, it's been very like traditionally easy to use those automated tools for those applications.
Gotcha.
But in soft tissue, you know, even if you like have 4 radiologists, maybe they'll draw the margins differently.
Gotcha. Okay.
And so that's inconsistent even across, you know, humans who are the experts. And so then you cannot at this time rely on AI alone to do that part for you. And so that's the data analysis step. And then the production step is mostly automated. So that's really nice because we built it that way. It's scalable, and already from like 2 months ago, we have now 5x our capacity in preparation for what's coming. And so we're able to like really quickly sort of expand that.
So that's what my super question is then, basically, is could this be a thing that eventually every hospital has a Lazarus 3D printer inside the hospital, and then you guys are in HQ, they send you the files, you do your manual stuff, send that to the printer, and then it prints in their own facility?
I would say that a lot of companies and hospitals even, you know, that that could have afforded it, have tried this approach, and it has not been very successful in the past.
Gotcha.
And so that's because it's adding a significant burden to the hospital.
Oh, they have to
in
have
terms
someone
of time,
that runs it.
Cost, space. It's just like too much, right? Like, it's like, oh, do you cook your lunch every day or do you just order in? And so it's, what are you going to focus on? Are you going to spend that time doing, you know, your work, or are you going to spend that time doing this other thing that can be done better elsewhere or in a different way? And so we provide a turnkey solution, really keeping in mind that the hospitals are already overburdened. We don't need to add another thing.
Like it needs to just show up.
Right. It's just like just shows up, and it's like open it, take it to the OR, rehearse it, you're done. Right? Now bring in your patient, you're good to go. It needs to be as effortless and seamless as possible for them.
And when it shows up, like what's your guys' what am I trying to say? Like, what's your like the expression you try and give off? Like, is it delivered in like a box and it's like, hey, like here's your delivery? It's like a big smiley face, or is it just like, is it like a a government box? Like,
no. So it's a like I said, it's a medical device. So even the packaging has to be in compliance with these you know, guidelines that are in place. And so there was like a lot of testing and validation of like the process of the shipment to make sure that when it shows up, it's not damaged, for example. And none of this requires any special storage or handling.
Nobody wants a broken heart, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly. So you're right. So it shows up in a box that is like, you know, a standard looking box, but it has its medical device labels, it has its booklet in it. It's called the IFU. It's the instruction for use.
Okay.
And then it has a UDI, which is the unique device identifier.
Okay.
And all of this is anonymized. Like there's no way to track or trace this to the patient.
Gotcha.
And so as far as we're aware, it's just an ID that is fully anonymous. And then as far as the physician is aware, there is nothing that's like linking it to them, but we assign the unique identifier right at the beginning, like when the order is placed. And so that's how they know.
Gotcha.
Who
Okay.
it is.
So there's no smiley faces. There's no like
smiley
expression.
face.
Okay, gotcha. Well, very cool. I mean, you guys are obviously doing like, you know, amazing things for the patient and the surgeon and everything. So that sucks. You can't make it like happy, you know. But like obviously, you gotta be serious.
The FDA is going to be like, why is there this smiley face?
Yeah.
Like, what's the rationale? Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Do you? I mean, well, I guess it's like HIPAA and all that stuff. But do you ever get to hear from patients that have had surgeries that have gone well because of your 3D?
Yeah.
Okay.
So a lot.
How do they get a hold of you? Are they just like emailing you or something like that? Like, did they know it was Lazarus 3D that did the 3D printing? Like, what's that like?
Yeah, no, all the hospitals that we work with obviously know that it's us, right?
I meant do the patients know?
Oh, do the patients know?
Yeah,
a lot of times the patients will know.
Okay.
Actually, there have been situations where they have interestingly written to us, like physical like letters to Lazarus,
That's
and
what,
it's
that's
like
what I was gonna ask.
insane to get that. It's like,
Yeah.
oh my goodness, like I can't believe this.
I'm sure it's
but
it's a nice letter, right?
I mean, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, it's like, wow, I had this surgery and, you know, I was so nervous and that kind of
Oh my
thing. And
God.
it's like hearing that, it's a rare occurrence, but sometimes we get them.
Yeah.
And then 100% of the time, the surgeon will show it to the patient, right?
Very
It's
cool.
like, why not?
Yeah.
It's like, you know, it's so cool for them to see this and to understand their own condition in this light, in this way. And so, yeah, they always know that it's Lazarus. And then they go look it up. And anyway, we've been on so many, like, you know, shows and events and like Kevin O'Leary, you know, like had the Shark Pitch. And so tons
you did
tons.
Shark Tank or you did his own little thing?
So Kevin O'Leary had Shark Pitch through Start Engine.
That's what it
and
was.
that was
Yeah,
virtual.
yeah.
And so we were you know, the winner of that.
Oh, you won it?
Thing.
Wait,
yeah.
wait, what
Yeah.
happened with that? Also,
Oh.
can you move your mic more towards you?
Sure.
I'm sure this.
Yeah.
That's fine. Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
Is that okay?
That's perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. So what happened with that? So I pitched to Kevin O'Leary.
Okay.
And it was a blast, and there were a bunch of other companies that pitched also. And this thing, it was virtual, right? It was during COVID. I think it was in 2021. And Kevin O'Leary like gave his feedback on my presentation and the technology, and then he said that he could not have imagined such a thing that it existed, right? And so at the competition, we won some cash,
Cool.
which was Kevin O'Leary's cash, but it was no strings attached, and that was really cool.
Yeah, that's tough to do with him too. There's usually a string somewhere in there. Okay.
No, this was like very like, no, this is just to support you.
Cool.
And it was like, I think $25,000 or something. It was like not that much, but
Awesome.
at that time it was still a lot.
Yeah.
And we put it to good use.
Nice.
But after the event, we had several like follow-up calls and discussions on opportunities that we had and could have pursued, but at this time we don't think that is the right move.
Okay.
And so in the future we may revisit that conversation, but it's really cool. Like I get to text him. I can just be like, hey, this is me.
Does he want to invest
like,
if you do this, or like what's his like vibe, I guess?
Yeah, I think that I cannot disclose exactly like what was proposed, but it was a good proposal. And it, contrary to what people think of him, he's not like that.
Okay.
He's a very smart and strategic investor, of course, and gave us good advice as well. And I don't think any of it was selfish. So, yeah.
Good to know.
Yeah.
What was I gonna say? Do you guys have competitors right now, kind of, or?
Yeah, I think that the competition is going to be twofold. So one is the technology that existed prior to Lazarus, which is the hard plastic 3D printing approach, right? And so that has its place and value.
In the dumpster. I'm just kidding.
Hey,
Just kidding.
I think it's important to, you know, have other people in the space like that are
It's adorable. It's adorable, honestly. Keep doing it, guys.
Hey, okay, so there's that.
Yeah.
But I think the real competition is status quo, and status quo
gotcha.
is, you know, we're gonna look at the scans and we're going to do the surgery. There is no intermediary, and that is it's like this force of habit, or like it's the norm. And to break the paradigm of doing your best versus exercising it, exercising the game plan ahead of the curve, is a big shift. And I think that the surgeons that we work with want this for the patients, and they want the best care. They are the champions of cutting edge technologies and innovation in healthcare. They're the drivers of it, and they are the first champions of Lazarus as well. And I think that there's going to be that sort of, I would say, tipping point where it goes from just, these very prominent surgeons that really want to pave the path where it's not just for their patients, but even for their trainees, in the hands of their residents and fellows. They're giving them this ability to actually operate without risking the patient, right? And that's contrary to the traditional approach of the see one, do one, teach one model, where they will operate and it will be a patient. And to that patient, it's like, best of luck. But I don't want to be that patient. And you don't want to be that patient. But somebody's going to be that patient, right? So we created this alternative. And I think that the shift is really like, okay, how do we take this and make it a standard of care? And that is what's coming.
So that was my question, is how do you take this and make it a standard of care? So how do you make it, well, I guess there's twofold, because obviously standard of care for this really unique procedure per person is going to take a long time, because like that's also, it's expensive for them. There's so many other elements, but like I think standard of care for every single university, for every single any course, anything, should be Lazarus 3D. Like I should never have a surgeon that used a pine cone to learn how to you know what I mean, like that, like, so how do you get to that point, basically?
So you're talking about training, and I think for training there's already been a shift. Unfortunately, the shift has mostly been with institutes that really built the budget to support those opportunities for their trainees. And so I think that's a barrier still, right? Cost. And then for Pre-Sure as a medical device, it's a little bit different, because that burden does not exist. Like the hospital doesn't have to pay for it. The patient can pay for it, but the insurance should pay for it and will pay for it. And so ultimately, that's going to be the driver of increase in adoption, is like reducing those burdens, cost burdens, and then also like data, right? So hospitals, as they start, and even the hospitals we're working with, are already seeing value in it, right? And so they save like 2 hours in the OR. That's cost savings to the hospital. Like there was a case that I can't talk about, but it was an extremely complicated case in babies, nonetheless. Multiple of them. Anyways, so and so like in that situation, it's like, what are we even going to do? And there is like 30 surgeons involved, like 30 healthcare providers from 7 surgical specialties are involved in that case, and they are all going to have to work in synchrony with each other, communicate with each other. They're not all going to be there at the same time. So like timing of every bit of like the next step, it's cutthroat. And there's no room for error. Like, how do you plan so to the T that your every next step, right?
Lazarus 3D.
And so that's where it's like, okay, this is happening. And so they did do it, and it was successful. So that's amazing. I think that when the hospital starts seeing that value, they're going to be like, what else? Who else, right? Like, it was these 7 specialties and these 30 surgeons, but the hospital is much bigger than that, and the industry is much bigger than that. The health system, throughout the country is much bigger than that.
In other countries.
And and the problems are immense. I mean, I think we're just starting to like tap into the most obvious things right now, where we see value and where other people see value, like, where the surgeons are seeing the value. Downstream, I think, is just going to be like, who knows?
Yeah.
It's going to be bigger than I can imagine.
Yeah. Well, I'm really excited for that. Also, I just remember because we all drank last night, so we were all out. I remember you mentioned that you can make a silicone like real vagina.
Oh.
That is insane. That is absolutely insane.
I mean, it's the same process, right? So you look at the scans.
It's just like I feel like that's gonna get out of hand so quick. You guys are gonna keep that under wraps.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many opportunities, but I think that it's so important to have the tunnel vision and focused.
You're like just blocking calls for all these people. Like, no, you can't buy us. Yeah. That's it. Wait. So what kind of patents do you guys have? Do you sell like a ton of them or what?
Yeah. So we have many. We have numerous patents, and all of them. The core patent really is on the ability for us to take soft tissue, right? Synthetic materials that are polymers of variable ranges, and so we can control those ranges, and then that ability and that flexibility to combine colors, textures, materials into what is a anatomic representation.
Okay.
Right.
So you guys can't have a competitor that does this like legally.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Oh, I didn't know that. Very
and
cool.
so it's very robust IP, I will say. Anything that is being created using our patented technology that is a body part or a anatomic structure. Okay. So you can think anatomic structure is not just restricted to body parts. It could
be a lot of different things.
Right.
Yeah.
That is our IP.
Okay. How much did you guys spend, and how long did it take to like finally wrap up all the IP that you worked on?
Yeah. So this is really great. So there was a conference room.
Okay.
There were a bunch of surgeons. It was me and Jacques, and we drew it out on a whiteboard, and we were like, okay, so this is what we are hoping to achieve, right? And then if we achieve this, what's going to happen? And the room full of surgeons said that, first of all, this thing, it does not exist. It's hypothetical and conceptual right now. But if it was to exist, it will change how they approach surgical care. And we're like, what do you mean? And they're like, no, like just the moment you have this, like we're gonna start using it.
I love
and so like we go home, we're like, of course, like brainstorming.
How many years ago was this?
Oh my goodness. It was when I started grad school. So it was like my first year, 2014.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, and so this was like a while back. And so of course, R&D, tinkering, and really trial and error, lots of failure led to the development of our first ever prototype, and it was horrible.
Do you have any pictures of that still?
Oh, I'm embarrassed. Like,
you should send me one. We'll do it side by side.
I'm not going to share that with anybody.
Okay.
Like,
it's like a
actually,
silly
there
buddy.
is one. It's like on my Facebook or something,
Yeah.
and it's this heart, and it was like the first ever model that we built.
Yeah.
And it's so terrible because I look at it and I'm like, oh my god, there is like a billion imperfections that would never pass QC today.
Yeah.
Like it's just like not gonna happen.
Yeah.
But I look at it and I'm like, oh, like that's where we started, right?
That is your heart.
And so who wrote the patent, right? And what did it cost? Well, on a $0 budget with your like savings on the line
with rocketlawyer.com,
right? You're not gonna afford a lawyer at that stage. And so early on though, we had a really solid team of advisors who had built very successful companies. They came from like this background in innovation and protection of that innovation through patents. And so they had really from the get-go been a very strong voice in our heads, and really even like when we had it down, we had heavy guidance from these people. They have hundreds of patents under their belts, right?
Nice.
And so they were our mentors and our advisors.
Awesome.
And I think that was so critical because then Jacques and I were able to put the whole thing together.
So cool.
Of course, we had a very nice law firm review it in a very cost-contained manner, and they were cognizant of the fact that we're a startup, and we appreciated that greatly. And so that's how we got it through. So after that, of course, we've had many revisions and follow-ons to the IP, as well as new IP that is in the pipeline right now. And that's been more expensive. So,
no, of course. I mean, and did you ever in your wildest dreams imagine when you thought of this 2014 that it would look like this at the end of the day, and people would be able to like just touch it and blood pops out and like?
No,
I mean,
I don't think that was like what we had envisioned. And so I think at the beginning it was just like this ability to use soft tissue and to make it be realistic, right? When the surgeon cuts into it, we were constantly asking, like, of course we were doing a lot of biomechanical testing and like formulations for the synthetic materials to replicate the biologic tissues, and that's all like on the bench, right? This is like as a scientist, that's what I was doing. But in the hands of the surgeon, it's not just those things that matter. It's ultimately, it comes down to the feel of what they experience when they cut into it and they pull and they tug the tissue away from the surrounding tissue. And then the differences, that like the nuance of that is so delicate, and no one will know other than the surgeon.
Yeah, of course.
That's what it is. And so for us, like, to dig deep into their like heads and be like, look, is this really how it is? And we were like, don't be nice to us, right? Like, be as critical as possible, like tear it apart and give us that feedback. And that's how we were able to perfect it.
So amazing. Do you see this product changing at all over the next like couple of years, or are you kind of just like, I mean, it pretty much does what it needs to do?
Yeah, I think at this point it is, like, pretty good, I would say. Of course, there's always areas or opportunity to improve, but given what it is intended for and what it is accomplishing for the opportunity for the surgeons, and then the realism where we are, I think it is in a very good place right now.
Yeah.
And for us to change anything at this stage, it's not easy. It's not like, we're just gonna like, change the stuff now, out of the blue, because it's regulated. Everything we do now is regulated.
Yeah.
However, for expansion outside of the urology space, like, kidneys and prostates and vaginas versus brain and,
You guys can make brains?
Yeah.
Oh, that's so sick.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, keep going.
Yeah, no, it's true. So it's completely different.
Yeah.
Completely different tools, different materials, different densities, different textures. Everything is different, right? And so, of course, all those other areas like cardio, neuro, congenital, pediatric, like, and then even soft tissue, like for musculoskeletal, GI, pancreatic cancers, like all this stuff. The list is quite long, and every single one of them will be different.
Very cool.
Right? So that's where it's fun to always have that, luxury to R&D and
keep growing.
Yeah.
If someone had like a lot of money and they offered you it, could you make a full life-size version of themselves?
Yeah, we could, but I really don't see the
how much money are we talking?
That.
How much money? What if they were just like, I don't know, I'll give you $5 million. I'm a billionaire. Would you guys just be like, yeah, let's do it?
Like, I mean, I would not turn the money down.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
Intellectually, I would question the why.
I think I think it'd be cool if you had maybe you had like a cool like room that has like a bunch of like old artifacts like that. Maybe like you have like literally an exact replica. Like that's my body. Like that's my heart.
Sure,
and that's
you
want to
do that?
Like,
yeah, we could do that.
Actually,
yeah.
I mean, I can't do it, to be honest.
No, I
this
mean,
isn't an offer.
It's everything that's in the scan we can recreate, right? And so from head to toe, we can recreate.
So
the
cool.
other day we built this like entire abdomen.
What?
Like I think I have it on my phone.
Nice.
But it was this abdomen of a very, I think a patient that had a comorbidity, so obesity.
Okay.
And so we built it, and we're like looking at it, and even we were like in awe of it. Yeah. We're like, oh my God, like,
How do we do
and
this?
then it wasn't just the abdomen that we built, but everything that was inside it. Like we did build a lot of the internal structures. Like the liver, it was this big.
So
like
cool.
Like my liver is probably like this big, right?
Okay.
And so this patient's liver is immense, and then their heart, like again, their kidney, and then their gallbladder, and their arteries and veins, everything we recreated. It was just like very impressive, even for us to look at it, and we're like, holy shit, right?
Is that the biggest thing you guys have built so far, or built?
No, I think that the other thing that I was talking about earlier.
The person that had the two things or whatever. What do you mean?
No, the case where there were
the babies.
Right.
Gotcha. Okay. Gotcha.
That was probably more complex, I would say. But this, in an adult case, this is the largest adult case we have built ever.
No, that's absolutely amazing. How big is the team now? I know it's obviously you and Jacques, and then what are we talking? Was when I interviewed you, I want to say maybe it was like 5 to 10 of you. I don't know, but where are you guys at now?
I think at the time it was mostly like interns, right? And it was pretty early on for us, so I think it was like 5 main people, and then there were some like consultants and all this stuff. And so of course. We have grown, and now we are at, I think, 15, 16, something like that, and growing very quickly. So I'm confident. Hiring? Yes, exactly.
What are we hiring for? What are we doing?
So we are hiring for a lot of roles.
Okay.
At this time, definitely the first set of hires are going to be the sales force. So we've just onboarded a person to manage our Southeast, as well as our head of market development. Okay. And now we're looking to hire for the South Central, Southwest, East, and West. Okay. So that's like 4 or 5 roles. It might be more than that. It could be multiple people for the same for those regions as well.
And what does that look like? Because that's basically like a growth question. So are they just going down and knocking on hospital doors, or like what are they going to universities? Like what's their role? Yeah,
so their role is to really support the surgeons and the hospitals that we already have existing partnerships with. So those hospitals are part of large health systems, and so we may start with one department or one surgeon, and to service their needs, right? If they have a case, like you go follow up on it, and you make sure that they have all of the support, and then their admin are also seeking support as well for on the billing side, so providing that as well. Gotcha. And just really I would say it's mostly customer service. I would say that's really the role, because we never, our team is never going to tell a surgeon what to do. We are not there in the OR to tell them, oh, now cut here. Yeah. No, that is not what this is, right? They're using their expert judgment to exercise a plan that they already created. And so this is just their plan and execution before the patient's procedure. So for the salespeople, it's really just supporting the teams. And then as they expand out, from one division or one institute or one hospital to subsequent hospitals in the same system, or even onboarding new health systems or new hospitals or private practices, providing that infrastructure and the support to those people. And there's a learning curve too, right? Educating the new people or the new institutes that we're onboarding with, what is really this technology? Because it is new. It is so new that it is difficult for people to really they get it, but to understand this is really a replica.
You need to plug this into your process, kind of a thing.
And then the billing side, that's new. Gotcha. And so learning through that, and then our team being able to support that, that's going to be really important too. Yeah.
And what was that? Because you mentioned the FDA process a few times. What was that process like? How was it? I'm sure it was very grueling, and you had to prove yourself, and what does that look like though to get approved by the FDA?
Yeah, so I think that with the FDA, they care about safety above all, right? That's key, and transparency. So if you are upfront about what you're doing, what the intended use is, and be really clear and precise and concise in the description of what the technology is, what it can do, and not like stretch it too far from there, and talk to them and ask them a lot of questions. It's really like any other process. They will be aligned with you and they will help you. And so they are a unbiased entity, right? So they're going to review everything per protocol, but I don't think that they were out there to get us or work against us or be an obstruction in the path. I really think it was to the contrary, where they were even brainstorming and like kind of going back and forth, like what is the data that we're seeking.
Very cool.
And for what reason, and what statistics, and what data sets and all of this stuff. And we are scientists, so we were working very well with them. I think where people run into problems with regulatory bodies is when they try to hide stuff, or like,
or if you
be
clearly
like,
don't know what you're talking about,
right? Or you don't know what you're talking about, or you're trying to like circumvent the process by like taking a shortcut approach, or like, I'm not gonna do this work. That's where you're gonna upset people, and that's just in general, like our experience working with the FDA has truly been really positive. And then even like recently I was at this conference in Boston. It's called the AdvaMed MedTech conference.
Oh, I was there too.
Oh.
No, I'm just kidding. No.
Oh.
Just kidding.
Well, too bad. You missed out. There were lots of cool companies there, right?
Okay.
And of course, all of the leaders in the space were there, like these multi-billion-dollar companies.
The ones that couldn't do what you did,
Well, they've done many other great things, right?
Of
So,
course.
And then the FDA was there too. Investors were there. So many people were there. And so when I was in that room with all of these officers, it is intimidating.
Of course.
But when one approached me and we had this really nice conversation, I was like, oh, this is like so cool. And we were just talking about like small stuff, like, how long are you here for? Like, where did you eat out? And they're like, no, like these are our budgetary limitations, like we're the government, whatever. And so like it was so nonchalant and just a normal conversation, not intimidating at all. And it was so cool when they understood what we're doing, and then they even kind of recommended like these other programs to us, and they're like, oh, there's this other thing, did you know? And so now we're following up on those opportunities, which are independent of the 510K clearance that we have.
Very cool. I mean, I'm a huge. We gotta get to the airport, so I'm gonna wrap it up soon. But I'm a huge Lazarus 3D fan. Where do you think you guys will end up in the next couple of years? Like, what are your goals, I guess, for the next 2 years? Yeah,
the goals are pretty defined for us at this stage. In the next year, we want to, really be an asset to at least 1,000 patients. Okay. And in the next 2 years, 10,000 patients. And so really it's very mission driven, where we want to look at what the changes, what the positive changes that we're driving. And then in terms of growth, really starting out in genitourinary and then being able to tap into these other high risk areas, like I mentioned, where like any kind of brain cancer, gotcha. Cardio, any kind of heart condition that requires surgical intervention. And a lot of times it's like the risk is so high, you really don't want to be that patient. So to be able to impact those lives. And then I think that in probably 2 to 3 years, our goal is also to build out a nonprofit arm of Lazarus that awesome. We're already talking about it now, and people are excited. Nice. To be able to provide this to those that can't afford it. Oh, I love that. Yeah. Then it's, so many reasons, right? Like they may be uninsured. Yeah. Maybe their insurance doesn't cover it, and that's unfortunate. Or, they're in a rural community where their access to physicians or healthcare providers are not so, up to speed with what is maybe at a center of excellence, what's available, right? And so to be able to provide and support those rural communities or those patients that can't afford it or the uninsured, it's a mission. And
That's
I think,
awesome.
again, there's a lot of heart, and there's always heart in everything that we do.
So cool.
Yeah.
I love that. I hate to go off the heart thing and go to the money thing, but what do you got when you guys look at your sales? Do you look at if like do you have a sales goal, or do you go we have a patient's goal?
It's one driving the other, right?
I mean, of course, but
Yeah.
like, are you like we're gonna hit I don't know what you've already hit, but let's say we're gonna hit $10 million in a year or two, or whatever, or are you kind of
so there
more
is
focused?
milestones, right? So there's
Yeah.
very there's like a cost estimate of what these things should be roughly, and you know, it's either hospitals paying, sometimes patients paying, but hopefully insurance paying, and that's the goal.
Yeah.
And so we are able to obviously create a projection, like, so that's the revenue projection. It's difficult to know because in this space the onboarding of a sales cycle can be very variable, and so that is like a little bit TBD.
Yeah.
But yes, every like year over year we have sort of like, okay, between now and next year it should be 2x, and then it should be 4x, and then 10x. So
Gotcha.
that's definitely our strategy from like the revenue approach.
Very cool.
And then it's driven by multiple factors. So one is, of course, like number of cases. Then number 2 is number of indications. And 3 is like number of hospitals. So, yeah.
Very cool. I love that. Well, yeah, I'm so excited to see where you guys go. I mean, again, love you, love Jacques. Like, you guys are going to absolutely crush it. And, yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So that's why we strive.
Well, thank you so much. I am so glad that you were able to like pull this off so last minute.
That's too
and
easy.
in this space, which is
So beautiful. This is the first time we're filming in
like
here.
literally
So gorgeous.
the coolest space ever.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it.
I love
and
those
a new
lights.
shelf's going in right there. It's gonna be really. Then everything. So I'm like, it's so beautiful. And then on the double camera, you can barely see anything.
Yeah,
so.
I'm looking at the cameras. It's
Yeah.
like so cool.
Yours looks really cool. Like
I
that.
know.
Yours looks like almost like animated. Like you don't even look real. So cool. Well, thanks.
No, it was like, this is great.
Yeah.
I wish that I lived here now.
Well, next time so I told you I'm planning on doing a big female founders med tech. What's will be me, you, Sydney, Vina. We did
Vina.
this last. Vina.
Yeah,
Vina.
yeah.
And maybe one or two others, but we're gonna have
Yeah.
a big round table.
That's gonna be
conversation.
so
It's
cool.
gonna be really cool. We're gonna get it done.
When are you planning? Do you know?
Oh, no idea.
Yeah.
That one's just like.
It would be interesting to plan it around like a healthcare or
I'll get on
you know,
it.
something like that, right?
Ooh, then I can
like
get some
an event.
big ballers in here too. There you go. Yeah.
I don't know when the next thing is happening. Like obviously so there was a MedTech Connect event 2 days ago at the Capital Factory. And so of course like some people were here. Sydney was there. I don't know when the next thing is happening, but I would say that it could even be like South by, I don't know.
Yeah,
Like,
we'll get it done.
that might be
Could
crazy,
be my
a
beer
little
pong
bit
tournament.
hectic.
I don't know.
Yeah, you're already doing that other thing,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I don't know. Yeah.
Sweet. Well,
Yeah.
awesome to have you on. We'll get you to the airport here.
Yay.
Bam.
Thank you, Cory.
I wanted to thank you for watching this entire episode of Why We Strive. Be sure you head to whywestrive.com and subscribe so every Tuesday you can see incredible interviews with some of the best tech founders, investors, and creatives in the industry. Have an amazing day, and don't forget to keep striving.